Spontaneous reading for you beautiful souls here today. Bit different. This was very on the spot, but there's a lot of energy coming through, so I thought it would be great to pull some cards. So hello beautiful multi-dimensional beings, light warriors, star seeds, earth angels incarnated. Welcome back, or hello if you're new to a channel reading, a message for you beautiful souls. Release. This card is bringing through a very, very, very interesting message, because with release, this is like you guys are a soul who has been through many, many, many journeys of release, meaning letting go, having to let go of physical, but also we're focusing on the internal aspect here of release, being ego deaths coming through very strongly, awakenings, deaths and rebirths. You are someone who has had to release a lot, which is not an easy process, because ultimately you have been through many awakenings, and so that is the only reason why you've had to release. Because, sorry if you hear talking in the background, that's the only reason why you've had to release, because all of these awakenings have awoken you to these energies that we could acknowledge to release in the first place, which means really letting go. And this is through these awakenings that you've had 111 and these ego deaths. Now, ego deaths are not for the light of heart. You guys have experienced ego deaths and rebirths in a way that the ego and ego deaths can feel feelings of, you know, the fact you've embraced feeling as if this crumbling moment, as if maybe I don't know anything, you know, maybe I don't know what I'm doing here, maybe like all thoughts like this, right? Because the ego is ultimately the aspects inside that build up to make us feel secure, safe and protected. And so the ego is the thing that makes us feel like we have a lot of understanding about ourselves or our life. So when we go for an awakening and awaken to all this knowledge, we have this ego death and realizing actually, and this isn't what an ego death is. This is how an ego death makes us feel. An ego death makes us feel as if we don't know anything anymore. An ego death makes us feel as if everything we've learned was pointless, or that maybe we thought we were a lot further ahead than we actually were in some way, shape or form, you know, consciousness wise, mentally, anything like this. So during these awakenings processes, you've been through many ego deaths, which means feeling this type of way. Now, that's not actually what an ego death is. An ego death is a breaking down of hardened layers of not illusion, because nothing is really illusionary. It's all just different frequencies, vibrations, things like this. But there's some frequencies that can create these kind of paradoxes or blindness. And that's why I would say the illusion is referred to as this type of blindness that can be created, which is simply meaning out of our awareness of realization. So when you awaken, you have everything brought out of your blind spots into your view of awareness, realization. And that can feel very, it can trigger those emotions that we spoke about, feeling like, you know, I don't really know anything, or I thought I was more further ahead than this, because the amount of information that's revealed to you is ultimately a larger quantity than everything you've knew up to this point so far, right? So if you're gaining all this realization of illumination, of realization within and around you, then it's like that amount of energy of knowledge and realization is bigger than how much we've actually learned thus far through our life and journey, right? These awakenings are integrations of large amounts of energy, and so that's why I say ego deaths can feel this way, but ultimately it's not really the truth of the case, right? The truth of, or your highest truth of the situation isn't that you haven't got very far, you don't know anything and what you're doing, but this is the emotions that can trigger from certain ego death processes and awakening processes. So it's not that that is the case, it's that this is what can happen from effect of the fact that, again, in that quantity of ratio between the information and realization that's pulled into the view of realization is a lot of a larger amount of realization than what the past mental framework of understanding we had before. And so ultimately that's why it can make us feel that way. But that feeling is very relevant and necessary, because in feeling as if we don't know anything anymore, or our ego breaks down, right, in that sense, we become the most perfect, beautiful students to learn, because our energy is and ego is completely broken down. So the limitations of our mind are then broken down as well, because we become this beautiful student in the fact that we're seeking to learn from literally everything around us, from our spirit guides, from internally. We are having more open thoughts and questioning and looking from different perspectives, rather than just one solidified, quick, condensed judgment, right? So you're someone who has such a beautiful soul, because through all these awakenings you've been through these ego deaths, which make you this beautiful student who learns from literally everything and everyone in life, nature, everything you learn from, and you see these teachings in little ways, and you have these more expanded thoughts because of the fact you're not condensing internally into quick judgment or knowings towards things. The ego thinks and wants to know everything, even if it doesn't. It likes to presume things to have that gap filled. But when we have that broken down, we're more open to saying, oh, and leaving room and saying, I don't know what that answer is actually, and not just condensing into one quick judgment. And so it leaves more room for thought, more room for new thought. And you guys have been through so many awakenings and these ego deaths that you've actually had to embrace feeling like the student, feeling like you do not know anything at points, feeling like, what is reality, feeling like, what am I doing here, what is my path, and that is your gift. You know why? Because that made you so open and receptive to so much more expanded conscious perceptions than you would if not, right? And it's almost this energy of being more open or more diligent in like our awareness, observation, consideration to things when we take those layers of the ego down. So now we split the deck to reframed. So there was a lot that was reframed for you in so many ways. There's been a lot of situations reframed for you through each of these awakenings and ego deaths. And can I just say as well, that's why I was highlighting how special it is to actually go through this process, because not many people are going to get to that point of ego death, because it ultimately is very, very triggering to our root chakra, because we have to let go this sense of security of self, of knowing, of understanding. It's kind of like we become a child again. We have to come back to our child, our inner child. And, I think that there's a lot of people who are going to resist this process in particular, and not want to see themselves through the eyes of their own questioning or their own review or their own judgment, right? And not judgment in a sense of like negative judgment, but judgment in a sense of curiosity and questioning about the self, and the self in its blindness and shadow ways from the ego, right? Because ultimately it does trigger some things, and we build the ego to protect, right? We build the ego to protect. So there's a lot that's been reframed for you, and all this whole message feels very past tense. 818 I just saw. This feels like I'm recalling a journey for you. It doesn't feel like I'm speaking about something current. And that's not to say you can't have ego deaths currently going on, because you guys, I feel like you go through multiple awakenings, and you've had some bigger awakenings or ascension shifts and some smaller ones, but regardless, either way, you're always going through shifts. And so there's always an element of ego death that's intertwined with this, because our ego is never just, so when we awaken, our ego doesn't just dissolve, like it's a part of us, and it shouldn't be something we want to get rid of. It's something that we get less involved in a sense of, we're not swirling down this pool being the fish, we're watching the fish and understanding this swirling is the ego, right? So it's like with our shadows and things, it's like we never get rid of them, we understand them, and then we get less caught caught out in the swirling of the intense energy that they can create sometimes. But the ego, it can be evolved and can actually be beneficial. So, you know, there's all these things. It's like with anything, there's like this sense of healthiness and how we use anything. There can be usage for destruction or destruction of self or limitation of the self. Yeah, there can be anything we use for limiting the self or to help the self evolve. And so you guys have been evolving your ego within each awakening. So as your soul is arising and evolving, right, your intuition and your soul aspect, your ego aspect of self has also been evolving. So this more primal part of you and your human nature has actually been evolving through your soul, because these aspects are almost differing inside, in a sense that within you, you hold all of these different aspects of self that make up the unity of you, like a stained glass window. And this ego has been evolving so much through your incarnation, and it's almost like the ego is part of your vessel, right? But your soul is inhabiting your vessel, and your soul is eternal. So your soul enters this vessel and this ego to evolve through it, to evolve the ego through the usage of the inhabitation of the vessel with the soul, right? So through all of these processes, you're still yet always going through these awakenings and these reframings of reality and the self. And it can cause these ego deaths, and these ego deaths lead you to packages of energy that you awaken to, that then you release and let go and understand deeper. So your actual ego has been evolving, which is like you evolving like your DNA as 1111. You evolving your DNA as a human species in the astral collective, within the collective consciousness, really beautifully. You have balance coming out now as well. You have been, yes, going through so many different unbalances to rebalances, reframing to rebalance, right? Yeah, so it's like we go through these periods of time of building up the self and building up the ego, building up the identity through different stages. Because when something major happens in life, we move, you know, oh, something about home, family changes, our foundations, our job, our relationship. Okay, then we ego death, because ego is the one that wants identity. Ego is the one that wants the labels and the sense of self. Okay, the soul has no sense of self. It knows that itself is everything. So the vessel and the ego is finding security through identity. And ego deaths and awakenings, they strip our identity. And a lot of awakenings can happen at pivotal life-changing points, like big moves, relationship endings, big endings in general with work, or path changes, things like this, unexpected things. Okay, so it's like when we go through these big life changes, we ultimately are occurring and proceeding through an ego death, because an ego death is anything that changes our sense of identity, right? So downloads, epiphanies, and awakenings can cause ego deaths, because it can ultimately change our sense of identity for the self, because you guys have been through so many ego deaths that you start identifying now with your soul rather than your ego, which is very significant, because throughout this incarnation, when we're born, we identify most of our lives with the ego until we reconnect with the soul. And now you've reconnected with your soul, your ego is trying to identify as your soul. Does this make sense? That's so weird. So because they're crossing over in that way. So even though, okay, so you start to identify, okay, your ego starts to attach to identify as more of with your soul self. So when something changes to the soul now, something changes in consciousness to the soul, now we have an ego death that's connected to the soul at a deeper level. And these can create more profound shifts in breakdown of reality. These can cause quite profound, big awakenings that can really shake us and our sense of grounding in reality, because now it's not the identity of self breaking down. Who am I? What do I like? Who do I want to be? Now it's what's reality? What is, you know what I mean? So these are deeper felt in the soul and can be a lot more intense. So you've been through different types of ego deaths. You've been through soul ego deaths, as you've been through awakenings, the aspects of your soul shift and change. okay? And then it's like that is applied to an ego death, but of reality, whereas you've also been through ego deaths to the sense of self and identity. So these ego deaths with reality, wow, round of applause for you guys, pat on the back, because they're very actually dangerous processes, and that's why they're divinely guided and selectively chosen, okay? These spiritual awakenings feel very impulsive, but spirit brings through the fact that this is, oh my god, awakening, intuition, impulse, awakening, okay? When it is time, it seems impulsive, like spontaneous, but it is intuitively and divinely woven out when we awaken, because if not, it can be a dangerous process. Because if you go through an ego death with your sense of reality, and not at that point yet of settling in the facts that we've already awoken to that the reality is not what we've been taught, it can actually lead some people to like spiritual psychosis and things like this. So you guys have actually done a beautiful job in the fact that at going through the stages of awakening, because I feel like this stage that we're talking about here, this stage is further along after the first awakening. This is much further along. So the first awakening is more, we're awakening to the fact that this reality isn't everything we've been conditioned and taught. And, you know, there is more than what we thought. You know, maybe we start realizing, oh, there's more after death, or there's this whole energetic planes or realms, or maybe spirits or spirit guides. Further along the line, this is where we start having deeper ego deaths to our actual soul and perception of reality, which has much more abstract concepts in that can be hard to explain or describe. They're more experiences of breaking down reality, such as maybe you have a very intense astral projection and you meet other dimensional beings, or you have some downloads or experience of flicking into someone else's consciousness, or these very abstract experiences that can shake the very grounds of your reality, because in reality there is no grounds of reality. The grounds of reality we've created, that we say we have to keep grounded or we'll lose our mind, is actually a construct, an agreed upon construct of perception of reality, that we choose to say this is the laws of reality, this is how it operates, which is basically the matrix that we've, in all the timelines that there is this current of timeline that the collective runs in, that is an agreed upon timeline. And once you start breaking out of the perception of that timeline, you do not fall into that grounding anymore. And then it's like you guys have had to go through this process of ego death, of soul death, of feeling safe to be ungrounded, and actually realizing there is no ground, but that's okay because you can fly, right? It's like, oh my god, there can't be any ground because we will start imploding and falling. But that's based on normal physics of reality and the fact we're walking and all this. Once you start accepting there is no ground in the first place, that's okay when we realize actually that doesn't matter because we can fly. Waking up to your higher dimensional nature, that what I just said will not make sense to everyone, and that is specific. Things are encoded to only make sense. So it's like encoded secret messages in readings sometimes, where it's like only you will understand if that message is meant for you, and that's how you know it's meant for you. Because if that resonated with you, then that is selectively chosen to be able to be comprehensible by you. Okay, so ponder. So you are connecting with some very deep spirit guides right now, and loved ones and passed over loved ones, having visitations from loved ones, having dreams of loved ones. And these loved ones who are on the spirit side actually connect you to a deeper part of the self that triggers this awakening as well. Because when we're connecting with loved ones, or this feeling of reaching out inside the self to someone who maybe has passed away, or spirit guides or something like this, this actually connects us to a deeper seat of ourself in the astral space. That, like, even regardless of who we're connecting with, it's awakened us to seeking and sitting in a deeper seat of feeling, of reaching out, and as our soul reaches out in the astral further than we normally do, or further and deeper than we normally reach inside ourselves. So you've been reaching deep inside yourself, could be from these things we've just mentioned. And it could be that you're reaching deep inside yourself through what you ponder about and these reflections you go upon, especially in solitude, and this sense of feeling of oneness that you connect with when you're on your own or at nighttime looking out and you think you're on your own in reflection, that there's this sense of connection within yourself, right? This sense of life within yourself, this sense of expanded vastness of space within yourself whilst you're in these feelings and in this space and these moods and these ponders, right? Something about a pond, goldfish, the moon, these white doves or seagulls or the beach, something about rock pools, rocks in the bottom of a pond, crystals in a plant pot, crystals in a pond, crystals in some form of water, or stones, and how stones are become weathered and smooth when underwater, because the running of the water almost sands down or weathers away or shapes to smooth these rocks. So this filtration process, this transformation transition process, when it comes to you becoming smoothed out by consciousness, by your emotions, as you are sitting as this rock deep in the seats of your soul within these moments that you ponder, you are polishing your consciousness by sitting in cosmic waters of expanded feeling, right? That's where I wanted to leave this little message, very spontaneous. And I just felt very called and guided. I know it's a bit different, I'm not on the camera, but I like to come on here when I get these feelings come up, you know, so sometimes it just is what it is. But yes, I love you guys so much, and I will speak to you all very soon. Mwah.